What I've got for you today is a best of 5 series of top level StarCraft 2. This particular match was played at the Esports World Cup, a $700,000 prize pool. And both of these players, not only are they great friends, not only are they on the same team, they are ranked amongst the very best in the world. Now spawning right here, in the top left-hand corner, playing with the blue Zerg pieces, we have none other than Reynor. And his opponent down in the bottom right, playing with the red Zerg drones. He goes by the name of Serral. Now, I've mentioned this a few times before already in previous casts, in previous videos that I've uploaded, but I was one of the casters for the EWC, so naturally, I already mostly know what ended up going down in this particular series. Although it is going to be nice to have a second look at it. At this point, it has been a good couple weeks since this particular match was played. And I have noticed that usually when I do cast a game that I already know the results of, I actually do see different things once again. Because especially when you have two high APM players going up against each other, usually there tends to be a lot of action around the map that is oftentimes missed. That being said, this is an absolute banger. This is one of the very best series played at the Esports World Cup. So if you haven't seen it yet, even though I know it's a Zerg versus Zerg, and a lot of people kind of dislike the mirror matchups, I highly recommend you watch this one because it is very, very good. Now, it is important to note that this is an elimination match. The loser of this series is out of the tournament. Obviously, both of these guys are ridiculously good. Serral for a long time. There's this weird thing about Serral, right? A lot of people think that Serral's Zerg versus Zerg is his worst matchup. But if you actually look at his statistics, the opposite is true. Over the last few years, his Zerg versus Zerg actually has his very best win rate. It's just that over the years, at important tournaments, like for example Gamers 8, like IEM Katowice, he got eliminated out of the tournament because of the Zerg versus Zerg matchup. And the problem with this matchup, especially when you are Serral going up against somebody like Reynor, is that there is just so much volatility. This is a matchup where both players effectively make units that are full damage and have zero survivability. So it's very easy for things to terribly go wrong, right? You're effectively speccing all your damage or all of your points into damage and zero into survivability. And you just end up with two glass cannons going up against each other. Plus, you're always dealing with limited amounts of information, just in general in StarCraft 2, but now you're dealing with limited amounts of information in a matchup that moves at about 1,000 miles an hour. So it's extremely easy to be caught out in the open with an unfortunate strat. So even if, technically speaking, you might be the more successful player, like for example Serral is in this particular instance, there is no denying that Reynor is an absolute beast. And he's also a bit more of a risk taker. Like Serral has always been rather standard, right? Rather conventional with the way that he approaches the game. And Reynor has a little bit more of that crazy in him. Like, for example, with this hidden baneling nest right now behind the main base's mineral line. This evolution chamber has been scouted by Serral. He sees the timing of it, and he may assume that everything is normal here, but that is not the case. Evo chamber gets cancelled, and Zerglings are already running across the map. And this is exactly where sometimes scouting stuff can actually work against you. It can actually not work in your favor at all, because now Serral has seen that everything is quote-unquote normal, but the opponent was hiding Zerglings, he was hiding a Baneling Nest. How much damage can Reynor do with an attack like this? Banelings are coming up. They will be here in just a moment. He's already engaging, mostly just to try and prevent this wall-off from completing. Honestly, a little bit early, though, on the fight, but here come the Banes. So this will be the first time that Serral properly sees how much he is dealing with. Queens get blown up to bits. New Banelings are morphing in immediately. Zerglings are popping out of their cocoons here for Serral, but he does not have a Baneling Nest of his own. He did finish up the Roach Warren already, so Roach production will kick in right about right now. His target firing with the Zerglings, though, has been excellent. That Baneling right there got cancelled just seconds before being done. There is a third base as well for Serral. I don't think Reynor can really easily snipe that down, because the Roach production at this point has begun. And Roaches are, of course, a much more sustainable unit in this type of engagement. I would actually not mind seeing this wall-off remade, but Serral is feeling like he can get away with using that extra drone, purposely spitting the Roaches here, trying to mitigate as much of the splash damage as possible. And this is Serral in a nutshell as well. Even though he got the wrong info, this defense has been as close to perfect as it could be. Given the circumstances, not knowing that the opponent is going for a Ling Bane Flood, given the circumstances that you skip your Baneling Nest, you went for a quick third base, you effectively have nothing to really deal with this for the first minute or so of the engagement. He handled this about as good as he could have. Drones were pulled as well, so we'll have to see how many he lost. Oh, just the one? Just the one. Just the one drone, and I think that must have just actually died in the main base there. Just the one worker has fallen, despite the fact that he did pull the units to help out in the defense against the Zerglings and the Banes. Perfect crisis management here. Absolutely flawless crisis management. This is one of those classic scenarios where you should just play like Serral. Yeah, if you're struggling in this matchup, just play like him. Now, it's not over just yet. Reynor is still sending more and more units in. Problem is, he's economically behind. He's tech-wise not at an advantage either. He doesn't really have the workers to be able to contest this very easily. Now, he's trying to sneak them out. Effectively, this continued aggression here is, again, a fake-out within a fake-out. Yes, he's got a lot of Zerglings, but with this number of Lings, you can't really achieve too much. So he's actually mostly just using this now as an opportunity to maybe get Serral to overproduce roaches of his own. Serral, though, has decided that, well, very soon is his time to be the aggressor. He is building up a Baneling Nest of his own, and he's been making non-stop army for quite a long time. Serral has not added on a worker in several minutes here. At least not as far as I noticed. It was Reynor who began with the all-in. He has now caught up as far as the worker count goes, but soon it will be Serral's turn to go for the full attack towards the other side of the map. Reynor tries to go into a third base right now. He's building up his own defensive Roach Warren. Starts up the +1 Evo chamber, remaking the one, of course, that he had at the front. That was a fake just a little while ago. He has done a good job, though, preventing too much damage for now, right? But he has seen that Banelings are out, and this is a problem. It's going to take a long time for those Roaches in red to get across. This is going to give Reynor time to potentially get some defensive troops out as well, but the supply count is already booming. Spine Crawlers are coming up here for Reynor. He wants to make sure that he holds this. He needs to make sure that he holds this, because if his natural gets overrun, that will be the end of it, but he's mostly defending now against Roach Bane with pure Zerglings. Serral, though, willing to put it all on the line right here. Defensive Banelings will be available, so that will be very useful against the opponent's Banelings, but a bunch of the units in blue here, they roll into the wrong targets. Drones run away. I think Serral mostly just trying to disrupt the mining, though. Trying to mitigate as much time as possible, and, well, at this point, all of the damage has been dealt. Serral gets a clean 1-0 lead. Next up, we find ourselves on Persephone. Nice attack right there by Reynor, setting the tone for the series. Serral's crisis management, though, was just a little bit too good. One of the big problems you run into with Zerg versus Zerg is that a lot of players will just straight up lose, right? Say you're Reynor and you're laddering in StarCraft 2. That very first attack that he went for would have destroyed about 99% of the macro players out there. Possibly more than 99%. So how do you actually practice this matchup? This matchup is also very, let's call it ping orientated. So if you can't really play this cross server, so you could get some of your very best ZVZ practice in Korea. But if you play on the Korean server from Europe, it does make life a little bit tricky, because everything you do is going to be delayed by like 0.3, sometimes even like 0.4 seconds, which is just a little bit too much. So if you're somebody like Reynor here, right, you can maybe get your best practice by actually moving over to Korea. And from what I understand, Reynor has been spending quite a bit of time over there just to try and prepare for games like the one that we see right here. Serral's course of action, I'm not exactly sure who his ZVZ practice partner would be. I'm not exactly sure what your best approach is, because do you really want to be practicing against one another, right? So obviously they're teammates, they're good friends, but if you are Reynor, do you really want to give Serral any additional practice? And likewise, if you are Serral, do you really want to be giving Reynor any additional practice? Probably not. It's probably not in your best interest to practice too much against one of your main competitors, because they might just be a little bit too good at preparing for your specific style. And this is mostly an issue, I feel like, in this matchup. Obviously, it's to a lesser extent as well in, for example, Protoss versus Protoss, Terran versus Terran. But ZVZ is a little bit cheeky, where weaker players will oftentimes just die to your first wave of attacks. And if that's the case, it's very difficult to actually prepare for follow-up pushes. Okay, now, it's been a while at the highest level of StarCraft 2 that we have seen a proper macro game of Zerg versus Zerg. I don't remember exactly what map it is, but this series does feature them. It's really quite nice. So the ultimate unit composition in ZVZ is Hydra Lurker Viper. Hydra Lurker Viper beats everything. The big problem with Hydra Lurker Viper, though, is that you have to make Hydras, Lurkers, and Vipers. And they're all, I don't want to call them all late game units, because you can get Hydras relatively early, but they're all very, very gas heavy. So you need to get about 8 gas geysers going to reliably make that transition. And the fact of the matter is that at the absolute highest level, the games very frequently end before that point, right? And below that, for 99% of ladder heroes out there, the games probably should end before you get up to 4 base eco too. So it's one of those weird situations where everybody knows what the ultimate unit composition is, but we rarely actually see any of them. For now though, it's gonna be Banelings again for the both of them. Serral making his Baneling nest at a more appropriate time this time around. Reynor also building his at the front. No evolution chambers hidden or anything along those lines. Both players have full vision of what the opponent's economy is currently like, at least as far as the expansions go. Little Zergling run by as well by Serral. Checks out exactly what is going on. Third hatchery, though, is going to finish up here. And the worker production will begin very shortly. Baneling nests are followed right now by Roach Warrens. Followed right now as well by Evolution Chambers. And you can sort of follow along with this type of matchup by looking at the production tab. There is going to be a small difference here and there. Reynor is going to test the waters with a single Baneling. Queens have been targeted though. There we go. Good snipe by Serral. That's another one of those things, man, that top-level players are very good at. It sounds so obvious, but if you've ever played, like, for example, Counter-Strike, you know how important having accurate clicks is. Just being able to click a moving object like a Baneling on creep is not easy. Just having mouse accuracy is actually really tough. I know there's a bunch of those, there's a bunch of software out there, actually, that Counter-Strike players like to use, and I guess any first-person shooter is a fan of, where you can specifically practice your flick shots and mouse accuracy and all that. I know that some of the StarCraft players actually use that as well as a warm-up, where they specifically try to, I think it's called, what is it? Aim something. I don't play enough first-person shooters to be aware of this. Anyways, I know some StarCraft players are actually a fan of that as well, just to get the exact clicks off, because it's not that straightforward to hit a moving target like that. Queens, though, were targeted correctly. Reynor's still testing the waters here with some of the links, but a defensive Baneling will be okay. Now, in case you don't watch a lot of the mirror matchups, especially for Zerg versus Zerg, an easy way to sort of determine who is ahead is not so much by looking at the unit count, but by looking at the worker count. Worker count is big, so you can see it reflected right over here at the bottom of the screen, and at this point, Reynor has a very significant advantage. It means that Serral needs to get something done. Reynor, though, okay, he had a Spire building there for a moment, decides to cancel it because he needs to start up units right here, right now, and even Spine Crawlers are going to be a necessity. Serral has done a good job hiding the roaches on his side of the map and now suddenly revealing them all in one go. 4 Spine Crawlers are being built right here by Reynor. Not usually something we see much in the other matchups, but incredibly useful if you can actually get them done against this type of attack right here from Serral. Now, Reynor actually helping out here with a little bit of creep. I wonder if that Overlord should be dropping the creep right over here. Either way, the Spine Crawlers are finishing up, and Reynor is really just trying to buy some time. Zerglings want to get the wraparound. Corrosive Balls are lending, but the Pokeboys are done right now. Corrosive Balls are always scary, though, and Serral is starting to break through. One of the big opportunities as well is to go after the tech structures. Obviously, the defensive weapon right here for Reynor is going to be the roaches too. Serral still making a lot of links, by the way, on the back of this, so the roach warren right now falls. He is building a lair, but no drone production. Unlike what Reynor did in the previous game, where Reynor started up the link production, and then he followed it up with drones pretty quickly. Serral is almost like feigning a retreat. While he is adding on drones right now, he's been adding on a ton of units as well. Low HP roaches get morphed into Ravagers, and they will spawn at full HP. It's one of the ways to try and save those units. Corrosive Balls are targeted properly, though, and it is allowing him now to get quite a few of those Overlord kills, and it's making all of this defense a little bit more difficult for Reynor. I do like the positional advantage right here from Serral across the board, but it's difficult because those Spine Crawlers are so freaking powerful. Even though they haven't gotten that many kills, bunch of Banelings trying to go around the site, Serral hoping to get lucky, doesn't quite achieve that goal either. Spire now rebuilding here for Reynor. Yeah, clean defense across the board. Despite the fact that there were quite a few losses, the mineral lines were protected. Roach Warren ended up going down, but he remade that one. And very soon, Serral sees it now, very soon, it is up to Reynor to grab that map advantage and that map control. Now, the fourth hatchery in the top right, it looks like it was a kill, may have been a cancel. Can have a look at the units lost. No, it was a cancel. Reynor a little bit too quick there for him to lose the full amount, but Muta production is really quite nice. Still, Serral seeing it allows him to prepare for it too, right? And if the Muta suddenly show up, that can be a problem, but the Hydra then is building. Spore Crawlers are also being added into the mineral lines now. There is one over at the third base too. Looks like both players are thinking at the very least about starting up a fourth. There we go. Reynor forced to take his in a different location after the one in the far top right-hand corner ended up going down. Okay. Now, what's nice about the Mutas is that you can deny all of the Overlords. It's quite common for Overlords in this matchup to actually be out on the map. Obviously, in the other matchups, there's usually going to be Stalkers or Marines or whatever, right, with anti-air. But in ZVZ, there's not a lot of anti-air available until the mid-game, so it's very common for the players to just sort of park Overlords on all of the attack paths. And this is where Reynor really can grab a very nice map advantage. So Serral's in the dark. Like, Serral doesn't know about the opponent's army movement at all. If you look at Serral's vision, he is just completely blind. So he needs to be anticipating potential move-outs anywhere he goes. He can check with Zerglings. All right, that's nice and all. He can check with maybe some Overlords too. Maybe run a couple of, I don't know, Changelings forward, but it's not easy. At this point, Reynor has a massive army. Plus, he's already got the +2 done. Serral, though, going into the 2-2 upgrades himself, trying to catch up in that department after the early game aggression. Now it's Reynor's turn to try and get some damage done. Obviously, this is a similar location as the fight on the other side of the map. Nice corrosive balls again, though. Hydras are added into the mix as well by Serral. Their damage is significantly higher, but Reynor had that eco advantage early on, and we can see it reflected right now in the supply count. He played the long game, and he got paid for it. So game number one, Reynor tried to go for a cheeky all-in, didn't work, he lost the game. Game number two, Serral tried to go for a cheeky all-in, Reynor defended, it didn't work. So what do we do now? Do both players end up cheesing? It's not really a cheese, right? The matches we saw just now, I don't think you can really classify them as like at least traditional cheeses there from the opponent. It wasn't really like a Zerg rush or anything along those lines, but they were intelligent timing attacks. Let's call them that. Or the polar opposite could be true as well, right? Where, okay, now you've both got a point on the board. Now both of you have failed a single all-in, right? Maybe it's time for the both of you to play the macro match instead. At the very least, the tone of the series has been set, right? There's always this first game, the second game in a series too, where you kind of want to test the waters and see how sharp the opponent is that day. Even good players have days where they just don't perform up to their same standard. And obviously, when you're playing at a big stage, if you're playing in front of a crowd, if you're competing for a large prize pool, that is the type of thing that may give you the tournament jitters. Then again, both Serral and Reynor are very experienced, but they tested the opponent. And it's very clear that both of them are looking sharp. It's going to be a hatch into a gas geyser, into a spawning pool here. This is going to give you enough Vespene to immediately get the metabolic boost started. So your main concern, of course, is if the opponent decides to go for some sort of cheese. And that's also why we see the Overlords out on the map. This alone, getting the little bit of an Overlord kiss here, is already the information that Serral was looking for. Seeing the timing of your supposed, or if your opponent's second Overlord here is big. Reynor will now also see that indeed Serral made a second Overlord. And even though he doesn't know the exact timing of the opponent's OV, it's probably not like a 12 pool or a super aggressive early game cheese, because at that point, the OVs wouldn't yet be in these positions. Now, you can sort of judge as well here based off of the distance that the creep has spread from the hatchery, the exact timing at which the opponent's base likely started. It's all of these little tells, like Overlord positions, the amount of creep that has been spread, the timing of the Zerglings leaving the natural. It's all about trying to pinpoint your opponent's strategy and whether or not they're trying to hide something. But because both players know that the opponent will be looking for such tells, Serral here in this instance, leaving the Overlord behind in a natural. It's technically a suboptimal play, but it's just gonna keep Reynor guessing for a little bit longer. Okay. One big problem, I think, as well for especially a Reynor in a matchup like this is that there just really aren't a lot of Serral games out there. Serral doesn't compete in nearly as many tournaments as Reynor does, and I wouldn't say that Reynor is somebody that competes in a ton of tournaments, but it is something worth noting. There's just very few Serral ZVZs out there. Even though he's a bit of a monster in the matchup, a lot of his recent games will still be several months old. Now, it's a quick Baneling Nest right here from Reynor. Much faster than the opponent, but yeah, it's Serral actually running the links across. Quite a common build that we see in this matchup. So Serral's strategy here is to delay his own Baneling Nest, mostly just use it as a defensive tool, but try to see if this influx of Zerglings early on can actually kill the opponent's third. In the meantime, a bunch of Lings do slip around the site. Defensive Banes are available. What about the Lings in the main base, though? Not really achieving all too much. Nope. Good defense here so far by the Italian Zerg. He will be able to keep his bases around. And this is a nice little advantage for him. Now it's his turn, though, right? It's the ebb and flow of the early game ZVZ. Now it's his turn to be aggressive. Normally the defensive player... Maybe I'm doing too many info dumps this particular series. I don't know. I just really like ZVZ. I'm trying to get other people excited for it, too. If there's too many info dumps, let me know. But anyways, usually you overmake defensive troops. Ooh, nice little Baneling connection there. He slips into the base. The site's better of it, though, because he knows he wasn't going to be able to go home in that case. Usually, if you're under pressure, you overmake defensive units. Usually, while you are the aggressor, you drone while you are pushing on the other side of the map. Meaning that you get this, like, back and forth, where you really want to try and overmake defensive troops and then counterattack after you've dealt with your opponent units. And then while you're attacking, that's when you try to sneak out around the drones again. And that's what we've had so far in this particular game. Ultimately, both players end up with a very similar worker count. And that's always kind of neat when, you know, that's an indication of a high-level game in this particular matchup. When despite everything going on, both players still get a very respectable worker count early on. Serral now currently has that worker advantage. Reynor has more units out. Can he actually get paid for that, though? Can he actually get value out of these units? It does not look like it. Serral making a lot of defensive roaches here of his own. He's going to need them because Reynor is showing up right now with a very large army. 2 drones have gone down. Baneling dancing, though, has been good enough. Nice split right there as well. Zerglings swoop around the site, but Serral has additional Banes available for exactly that task. Transfusion as well from the Queens, actually. Not to be undersold here. Very useful. And keep in mind that Reynor is spending a lot of time here running around with his units. And when you're running, you're not dealing damage. Double lair. That's a misplay for sure. Maybe this little... Okay. Zergling run by can achieve something, but Serral locks off his base quite nicely. He canceled. He canceled one of the lairs. Okay. Lair as well, by the way, for Reynor in the meantime. Look how greedy both players are, though. Like, every time there's an attack going on, they still sneak out drones. It's one of those things that can go horribly wrong. Only through lots of experience can you figure out when it's still reasonably safe to add on like 2, 3, maybe 5 drones. But the idea behind that is if you add on a few drones twice, you will end up with a substantially bigger economy than the opponent. But when both players are trying to play that trick, you end up still with literally an identical work account. Okay, so Reynor decides to go into a Spire. Fair enough. He's going to try and build one right in the back of the main base. Serral has a lair of his own right now, though. Ooh, Zerglings do sneak in. Again, a little bit of a problem. Roach attack as well at the front. Banelings roll in. Actually, quite a bit of damage done. Zerglings, though, don't really have a counter anymore. Serral decides to cancel the spine here, thinking he's fine. Still, though, he has lost 4 drones here. And this is the first time that Serral looks like he's actually kind of struggling holding on. Obviously, it's going to be a defense in the end, because that was a very minimal commitment there by Reynor. But 8 drones is substantial. Spine crawlers are coming again, just like the previous game. Reynor adding on a whole lot of defensive roaches. He doesn't really want to spend all of his gas right now because he would love to be able to make the mutas. But he needs the roaches for defense. Serral actually faking the move out here in the end, decides to go back. He now sees that the opponent is building a Spire, again at the absolute last possible second. Decides to throw down a Hydralisk then. And we may very well need a few Spore Crawlers here again in just a moment. Just in case Reynor decides to be greedy. Then again though, Reynor doesn't have a lot of gas, so only 2 mutas are coming up. Maybe just making a few mutas at this point, just to deny the opponent's map vision, is already worth it. Okay. So far, this game has been a tug of war, right? Both players sort of testing the waters a bunch, throwing some units at the opponent. Across the board, I like this position better for Reynor, but it's by no means a spot where you can just go ahead and push for the win. He started up Baneling speed briefly there, cancelled it again. A little bit of indecisiveness, maybe. Baneling speed is one of those upgrades that's really good if you want to try and obtain the win right here, right now. Looks like the mutas indeed have just been retargeting the overlords here. Reynor though has a 4th base now. And the 4th base is long before Serral's. Serral has been forced to make a bunch of Hydras. Hydras are of course anti-air. Very good against Mutalisks, but they also help out quite nicely, especially when the Grooved Spines upgrade finishes, which it is right now, in these Roach Wars too, because they can actually shoot over the backs of the Roaches. So the Roaches are going to be, I guess, the tanks of this party, and the Hydras can be the DPS, they can be the damage dealers. You can also use the Hydras here to snipe at least some of those very far forward units. Sometimes though, in a war of Roaches, all you want is Roaches. Hydras are very susceptible if they get jumped on to just straight up death. Corrosive Bowels also extremely useful. Serral wants to be fighting here, but I don't know if it's the right call. Reynor has a whole lot of roaches though, even though he's the one going mutas, hoping that maybe he can catch his opponent off guard with this massive influx of roaches. Fighting up a ramp though in a concave like that, not quite ideal. Perfect positioning for Serral. Reynor actually going above 200 supply right now, builds a bunch of structures, adds on 34 Banelings, and then cancels the additional structures too. He is looking to obtain the victory right here, right now, and he does have Baneling speed done right here. So maybe he started it up earlier, canceled it again because the opponent scouted it, and then faked it. Either way, we are going rolling. Is there enough for Serral? This is the first time he sees it. Needs to react immediately. Some decent corrosive bowel connections though. And Serral's army is getting overwhelmed. And again, the Hydras in the back are adding on a lot of damage. Serral also has an extra upgrade, not to be underestimated. The Banelings though eventually do make their way towards those Hydras, and Reynor's reinforcements are gonna be moving across the map very, very soon. One other thing to note though in these battles is that the defender's advantage is big. Serral basically will just have his units spawn straight into the combat, whereas Reynor needs to actually walk his units across. Tunneling Claws right now is done as well for Serral, so that means that his roaches can rapidly regenerate the HP while burrowed. Very cool play from Reynor, but honestly, again, very fast reaction speed as well by Serral. Only splitting up some of the army and not really moving it around too much, because sometimes if you're microing too much, you're actually missing DPS. So far, the concave here is nice again. Serral is about 40 supply behind though, and that is painful. He doesn't have any spines, but what he does have is just a sheer amount of units. Looks like we had an all-army hotkey as well here from Reynor, as now even the Muta makes its way across. Queens are joining in the fight though, and The roaches at the third base are spawning immediately. A couple of the roaches also decide to burrow underground. Serral giving them the temporary respite there to just heal up a smidge. And he is somehow, some way holding. That was honestly a crazy hold by Serral. He had a very significant supply deficit, but Reynor could not quite get the job done. That tunneling claws helping him out just barely. Okay. Time to go back to the drawing board. Where do we go from here? Honestly surprised that Serral ended up holding on there. That's a crazy defense. I feel like that's one of those spots where if you are Reynor, you win every single time you do that in a practice game. How in the world did Serral just hold with a 40 supply deficit in a roach war? Well, it's the defender's advantage. It's the potential to burrow your roaches, right? And give them that regeneration over time. It's the microing out of the corrosive bowels of the opponent while maybe getting lucky with some of yours too. There is certainly a part that is luck, but Serral escapes just barely by the skin of his teeth. That was the game pretty much over, but he holds on. And Tunneling Claws is a very scary upgrade. You can already see that Reynor immediately is looking around to see if there's any units hiding, maybe. A couple of the roaches are gone around the left. There is an Overseer nearby. Nomatized Carapace, not yet done here for Reynor. So those roaches could still be a problem. Serral, though, being extremely conservative. He sees, yeah, a few of them. There were 3 that snuck around the back. Okay. Hydra then comes up as well for Reynor. Infestation Pit also comes up for Reynor. I think another reason, actually, that Serral ended up holding there is the cost of the Spire. So Spires are 200 minerals, 200 gas. And he made 2 mutas out of it too, so that's 400 minerals, 400 gas, aka like 4 Ravagers worth right there. And I think he killed like 2 Ovies with them. Those mutas certainly were not worthwhile here for Reynor. And it's those little things added together that allowed Serral to hold, but he needed a little bit of luck. There is no denying that. Okay, he also starts up a Hive now. Hydra upgrades are already fully finished for the finisher. So he's making another Hydra then? Did he lose? Oh yeah, he must have lost the original. No. Oh wait, hold up right now. Was I hallucinating? Did he just queue up a Hydra then here for a moment? I think Serral wanted to go Hydras, didn't notice it because it's hiding behind the Overlords. Queues up a Hydra then for a little bit and then realizes, wait, I already defended that previous attack from my opponent. Yeah, okay, I wasn't hallucinating. Yeah, I already defended that previous attack with Hydras. It's hiding right next to it. Decides to go for the Lurker then. That's kind of funny. Okay. Roaches are still fighting though. Both players making the investment right now into Hive Tech, but they really don't want the opponent to know. Sometimes you gotta fake it. Those corrosive balls though, tank to the face. Little roach run by here on the left. Tunneling Claw, so frustrating. We also see the Spore Crawler getting targeted. So Spore Crawlers are detectors. That's the reason why the spores here are still important. Little roach run by as well on the far bottom right. And this might just be Serral properly striking back. Yep. No cancel on that one either. So that is the full cost of the minerals gone. Bunch of roaches here as well for Reynor trying to sneak around the site. He does not have tunneling claws of his own, so it's going to be hard to really achieve much. Okay. So, both players have a good economy now. Both players are starting up the transition towards 5 base. Both players have started building up the transition as well to a maxed out army that is aiming to be Hydra, Lurker, Viper. Vipers are good with Blinding Clouds. They're very good as well with Abductions, of course. You can even use Parasitic Bomb very nicely against your opponent's Vipers. It sounds a little bit silly maybe, but ooh, quite like this from Reynor. A nice little finishing touch on the Evolution Chamber, temporarily halting the production. Overseers are spellcasters, although we rarely see the contamination being used. You need to do everything in your might here to try and obtain the win. Both players trying to scout the opponents too, right? Just trying to figure out any sort of info. But the first Lurkers are out. And Lurkers just dismantle roaches. You really can't move in with roaches very nicely, although if you're, you have the overwhelming numbers, it's still doable. Serral decides to unburrow and run away. In the meantime, there's a counterattack happening too on the other side of the map. Reynor hoping that maybe he can, well, even sandwich these units or just cut them off, as he is starting to now overwhelm the opponent's third base. Lurkers are burrowing, though. There are corrosive balls, and corrosive balls do not need vision to be able to deal the damage there. Bunch of roaches are also moving in over here from Serral, though, and he decides to target fire down his opponent's lurkers. Reynor needs to run, tries to land some corrosive balls here and there on the cocoons that are morphing in. He's also moving in the same, or at the same time, though, here on the right, but Serral holds on. Very messy engagement across the board. Very awkward bit of micro there for both players, but Reynor's bleeding out a few too many troops for my liking. He is now able to also start harassing the opponent, though, with some tunneling claws. Tries to split off the roaches, but Serral noticed it in time. Serral decides to give him a taste of his own medicine. Okay. These two are so evenly matched. And that's what I love about this. The absolute pinnacle of ZVZ. It does not get any better than this in the current meta. At this point in time. We have never seen ZVZ played at a higher level than this. It's all just so razor thin. Like, I don't know if it's very obvious when you're watching the games, but the margin for error is just so tiny. Like, these guys make it look like roaches are a high HP unit. They aren't, okay? They die so easily in these type of fights. Lurkers, likewise, have a lot of HP, but you can use burrow here, despite the fact that the lurkers are burrowed, to try and save it. A couple of defensive lurkers would be nice. Reynor moves through, needs to unburrow, decides to reburrow them again, a couple of steps over. Overseers are, of course, a necessity to actually get that mobile detection down. In the meantime, there are still roaches going around as well. Looks like Reynor is dealing with them too. Let's do a little bit of first-person view here. See what the players are actually paying attention to. Serral trying to retreat here. This is what Serral is looking at whilst playing the game, and it's looking pretty hectic. This is Reynor's first-person view as he is trying to hunt up towards that high ground. 576 average actions per minute. He's trying to get the wraparound right now on some of the opponent players' lurkers. Moving through, trying to get his own lurkers into the right spot. Corrosive balls are landing. Serral comes in around the side too. Man, it's so chaotic. I'll take control of the camera again. Can be a little bit nauseating to watch 600 APM. It gets a little crazy. Okay. So as the dust settles, and it's probably only settling here for a very short amount of time, Reynor is still at an advantage. Serral's been trying with all his might to claw his way back, but losing this base over here is painful. Reynor still has his own, and he's now grabbing the Vespene gas geysers, and gas really is the main bottleneck. Players would love to make Vipers here, but the problem with Vipers is that they take time, and they're very gas heavy. And you can't really spare gas at this stage in the game very easily, nor can you really spare a lot of time. That's when those additional gas geysers are nice, though. It's effectively free income that the opponent does not have access to at this stage in the game. 6th hatchery even coming up right now for Reynor. Viper production has begun. I wonder where these guys are getting their late game practice. Ooh, that's so fishy. There's a lot of roaches going around. Serral morphs in a detector. In the meantime, there is a fight over here too. Viper just about ready here for Reynor, though, and that will be big. Big roach run by 2 from him. At this stage in the game, you kind of want to get rid of at least some of your roaches, so you can replace them with hydras instead. Just the sheer presence of the lurker can oftentimes be enough to tank the damage. Serral, though, trying to slow push here. Corrosive balls are also something you need to take into consideration, but a single Ravager is 100 minerals, 100 gas each. Cheaper than a lurker, sure, but by no means cheap. Okay. Viper production has begun as well for Serral. Both players just able to barely get a few of those units going. Blinding Cloud could be big. Abduction could be big too. Overseers are sieged up, which is a little bit awkward. This is the first time, though, that Serral's going to see them. And I think we're going to abduct. There we go. When you abduct, they do get unburrowed. That is a free lurker going down just like that. The more Vipers you can get, the better it is. But of course, you can also abduct your opponent's Vipers. So Vipers abducting each other is generally the absolute late game meta. If you can get enough Vipers out, you can parabomb the opponent's Vipers and abduct them as well into your own Hydras. It gets extremely messy very fast. Difficult base over here, though, for Reynor to mine. How in the world are you going to pull that off? Yeah, I don't think so. One Lurker is enough, it seems, to, at the very least, keep this at bay for the time being. A large number of units still moving around as well from Serral. Spinecrawlers are nice, but also not free. Serral, though, has been knocked down. Another nice yoink. He's been knocked down to only 40-ish workers here, which really isn't a whole lot. Reynor sitting at 57, which is also really nothing to write home about. But it is a decent enough economy. Serral did get the 5th base up and going, though, and that's important. Obviously, when you're dedicating a lot of supply to units that are, well, gathering resources, right? When you're making a lot of workers, it means that your ultimate maxed out army is smaller, which is a strategy all on its own. Sometimes you want to keep your worker count low on purpose just to suddenly bring down the sledgehammer with a, like, say, 160 supply army. Okay, Lurker's getting in position for Serral, though, and he's actually, yeah, he's actually gotten himself in a pretty good spot. He's going to be able to snipe the opponent's base. Well, at least if he targets it down. Good abduction as well by Reynor. Gets a couple of the opponent's Lurkers, but I think this hatchery is toast, and indeed it does fall. That means we're back to 4-base economy, which will suit Serral just fine, who's also launching a counteroffensive on the left side of the map. He was being a little bit indecisive with the movement there earlier. A bunch of the roaches, though, end up getting crushed. Let's actually back that one up. That is a crazy move. I think that was actually Serral's own units there, killing the cooling tower. So the cooling tower crushes the mineral fields. So this is as Serral's moving in towards the left. The cooling tower crushes the mineral field. Serral decides to burrow his Lurkers very close to the edge. And I think, yeah, it's some of his own splash damage there. Absolutely massacring his own army. That is going to make his army size take a little bit of a nosedive. But I think across the board, this was still a very successful attack. Abductions are still coming in. Reynor grabs a few of those units on their way out, and Serral is doing Serral things so far. Keep in mind that this game did not start off great for him at all. But suddenly, we are, well, 23 minutes into the match, and 190 supply right now for Serral versus 153 from Reynor. Reynor forced to go for a double expand at this point, remaking the old 3rd, remaking the old 5th. Additional Vipers coming up as well here for Serral. Again, they're expensive, but he's able to get a lot of value out of them. Some good abductions too, although looks like a lot of roaches paid the price here. Serral accidentally destroying some of his own units can be Reynor saving grace. There's not a lot of time to pay attention to those engagements. Accidentally clumping the units too close up to the cooling tower is a little bit unlucky, but it may be all that Reynor needs. He's now counterattacking, though. Back to a lot of roach production. Even Zerglings are coming back up. With the economies dwindling, both players feel like no longer can you really afford Vipers and Lurkers and Hydras and all the rest of it. When you're only at 46 workers, you're effectively, well, back to early game. You're effectively back to just 2-base economy. Some of the expensive units, though, are still here. And they are not to be underestimated. Both Zerglings and Roaches can just absolutely get shut down. Reynor misrallies a bunch of his troops. Loses quite a few of them as well. Counterattack here. Zerglings wrapping around a Lurker. It's awkward, but they will get the job done. Blinding Clouds will disable units underneath it as well, or at least reduce their range to just 1. Serral comes in. He now sees. I think he's on the hunt. Gets one of the Lurkers too. Nicely done. Still engages on the left side for just about a smidge too long. Loses a bunch of the Roaches and the Hydras because of it, but he is striking back in the meantime over here on the right. Blinding Cloud on one of the opponent's Lurkers too. That one has already disappeared. Hatchery itself falls too. Reynor has won the engagement on the left side, but I think he's going to have a hard time building up an army that is going to be able to match Serral's. His best chances right now are to go in for the counterattack, and I think Serral is reading this game correctly. You don't really need to be fighting the opponent's army here, I don't think. Yeah, Reynor realizes it too. GG gets called as Serral gets another win on the board. Serral showing us once again that he is considered to be the master of the Zerg late game. Nobody does it better than him. The constant, like ultimately what the late game comes up to, or what it all comes down to, I guess, if you want to boil it down to one thing, and that is problem solving. Trying to figure out what the best solution is in that specific circumstance. But how many times have you really been in that spot? Right? Like, how many times have you really been in that position over the last few months? Who can you practice against in order to get good at playing that late game? So I know actually leading up to this tournament, Reynor did spend quite a bit of time over in Korea. I'm not sure if he has like his own place there, probably. I'm not exactly sure. Either way, Serral never does. I actually asked this. I've mentioned this before in previous casts, but I actually asked Serral once upon a time at, I believe this was a Home Story Cup, like what his main method of practice is. And he said tongue-in-cheek that he likes to just sit and think about the game. But the more I think about that, the less I think it was actually a joke. I think he was pretty serious about it. I'm fairly sure I just kind of picture him sitting on the porch somewhere in the middle of Finland, probably looking down into the forest or whatever, right? And just trying to, I don't know, become a Zerg philosopher? I'm not exactly sure, but there is certainly a lot of thinking involved when it comes to practicing that type of late game. But if you can't actually get the practice from real-time games, you might have to just come up with scenarios in your own mind. As crazy as it sounds, you may have to become, I don't know, enlightened. You need to reach a higher level of enlightenment in order to figure these sort of things out. Because nobody's going to give you the practice, okay? Like, look, you could ask Reynor for games. You could ask Lambo for games. You could ask Elazer for games. Now, maybe Lambo and Elazer will give you straight-up matches, but I don't think they'll really be able to live up to the same level as Reynor. I don't mean that with any disrespect. I just think Reynor is a slight step ahead of those two. So, how do you practice it? If Reynor isn't going to give you games, if he is over in Korea practicing with the Korean Zergs, then how in the world does Serral get so good at the matchup? Apparently what you need to do is sit. Stare into the forest and think. I'm not very good at that. I'm getting the vibe, though, that Serral does very little doom scrolling. I think most of us, if we were to sit down and think about StarCraft, we get bored in about 30 seconds. Phone back in your hand. Going back onto the TikTok or whatever. You're not gonna find the answers there, man. The answers are in your head, bro. I would like to think of, like, if StarCraft is no longer around in, say, 10 years, right? We get, like, some sort of Finnish television program. Serral has become, like, a full-time hippie. He's just thinking about the game still, even though he hasn't touched the game in about a decade. Roach Warren's coming up again. Baneling Nest here at the front as well for Reynor. Serral decided to skip his. Match point right here, of course, for the finisher. Yeah, maybe Serral gets his advice from the StarCraft 2 Battle.net forums. Or maybe the North American server's general chat. Maybe that's where he gets his wisdom. Because whenever I am feeling a little bit down, whenever I'm like, oh man, life really seems to be, you know, pain lately, that's when I go to the Battle.net forums and I visit the general chat on the NA server. Because that's when I can really calm down. That is where the real enlightened folks hang out. All right, big Zerking push right now here for Serral. It'll be up to Reynor to try and defend it. Looks like there was a bit of a baneling explosion, though, as Serral did end up losing quite a few of his links. Reynor getting the correct hit. Roach is on the back of this here for Serral, but not an ideal situation for him at all. He does have the worker lead. Again, he droned up for a little while. Now it's Reynor's turn to be the aggressor. Ooh, Reynor has so many units, though, that Serral is already evacuating the third altogether. At the very least, he got the drones out of there. Defensive roaches are spawning right now here for the finisher. Queens are also out. Okay. Now, did I mention, by the way, that this is considered to be quite a controversial series? We'll get to why that is at the very end. I don't really want to spoil anything, but this is considered to be, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. Roaches, still used for defense, right? Reynor has a lot of links, but he hasn't really used them for too much, so he's mostly faked the big move outs here, and he was busy adding on additional drones. Plus, one armor coming up here as well for the Italian, meaning that he's going to be able to get the benefit for all of the ground units. It's technically a risky play. Serral now sees how many workers there are over at the third base, and I think this is the first time he really gets the info that indeed there has been heavy droning from Reynor. He was still anticipating some sort of multi-layered all-in coming out of two-base economy, but Reynor mostly just adding on drones there for a while. Reynor, because he was making, or Serral rather, because he was making all of those defensive units, now feels like he needs to do something with it, decides to move out, fake it, go back home. Lair starts up. Drones in the meantime on the back of this. Now, it was Reynor who was making a lot of units for a while already. Looks like he is now apparently going to be ready to move in. Lair starts up for him as well. Plus one Carapace is going to finish, but he's mostly droning behind this. So this could once more be a bit of a fake move out for him too. Serral calling the bluff for the time being, but maybe he should start up a few spine crawlers just to try and defend against this sort of attack. Because the plus one Carapace is a big power spike, and it's just seconds away from being done. Serral, though, making a lot of army. He does end up losing one of his overlords here. Is there enough? Push forward here from Reynor? No, not quite. Bunch of the drones will once more be forced to run, but only a handful of them end up going down. Both players trying to play the mind games. Both players also trying to lean into the image that they have created for themselves throughout these games specifically. A lot of fake move outs here. Both Reynor and Serral committing to attacks that they really don't commit much to. Just really trying to paint the picture for the opposing player that indeed they are ready to go for the all-in, and then they back off again. Trying to scare them into overproducing units, whilst actually just building up the economies. So, fourth hatchery coming up right here for Reynor. I think Reynor does not really want to go into another late game. Judging from that previous match, that was really his game to win. Serral brought it back in a very masterful way. I think if you're in Reynor's shoes, you probably don't want to play another match like that. Overseer Scout, though, here with speed. Overlord speed also increases the speed of the Overseer, so the Pneumatized Carapace is a speed upgrade for both the Overlords as well as the Overseer. It goes really quickly, and you can see everything that's going on. But now, Reynor is finally ready for a big assault. He has a fourth hatchery on the back of this, sure, but he hasn't really built anything else. There is no Spire, no Hydra Den, no Infestation Pit. This is just a whole lot of Roach Ravager with some leftover Lingbane for support. And he's got 138 supply of it, so it's time to move in. Serral has been preparing for this for a while, but does he have the numbers to actually get the job done? Corrosive Balls are connecting. It's a split attack. Push towards the left as well here. Reynor certainly winning that engagement. Is he simultaneously also winning the fight over here on the right? Keep in mind, again, defender's advantage is big, and Serral has already pulled off a miraculous hold before. But this time around, the mind games go in favor of the Italian Zerg as Reynor evens up the score. And that means it all comes down to this. Final game in this best of 5 quarterfinals of the Esports World Cup. Across the board, Serral appears to be the better player. However, Reynor appears to be the better, let's call him strategist. Macro-wise, Serral is extremely difficult to beat. You're unlikely to overwhelm him with micro. I think Serral is just capable of matching you in that regard, step for step. But Reynor has been able to out-strategize him, right? Like, that's a theme we've noticed. So these two have played against each other quite a lot over, like, the last 5 years or so. Reynor is one of the prime candidates for kicking Serral out of tournaments, and very important tournaments at that as well. And he usually doesn't do it off of the back of, like, the best macro or the best micro, but he usually does it off of, like, 99% micro, 99% macro, and then also, like, maybe 120% strategy, right? And that seems to be what you need to do in order to beat Serral. Mechanically, Serral is just so sound. We never see him get out-macroed. I think, yeah, at least as far as just pure fundamental mechanics go, Serral is by far the best. And obviously the margins are very minimal at the absolute highest level, but you can see it reflected in some of these games. Especially when well, obviously the units are identical and the players are making all of the same choices. Serral always seems to be ever so slightly ahead. Overlord kiss? Oh, no, it's gonna be a cheek. Not even. Wow. Wow, let's read into this and start some internet drama. Get the Reddit threads going. Reynor and Serral's overlords don't kiss anymore? Do they secretly hate each other? Question mark, exclamation point? That's how it goes in Formula 1. I sometimes think there's a lot of drama in esports, and then I watch Formula 1's subreddit or any of the news in that particular sport, and my god. People make stuff up. Like, it's just straight up stuff that get pulled out of nothing. Absolutely nothing. A lot of manufactured drama. It's very interesting to me. Esports has not gotten to that level yet, at least not StarCraft. Some folks are obsessed, man. It's something. They really try so hard to make something out of nothing. Anyways, couple of Zerglings. Moving around the map again. Both players testing the waters. For this year's EWC, by the way, we had heart rate monitors on the players. And one thing we notice is that Serral is absolutely stone cold. Like, in these type of scenarios, most players, when you're competing for this much money and you're doing it all for a single map, are sitting in a chair at about 150 beats a minute. That sounds absurd maybe, but even in the early game, they are effectively running a marathon. Serral was sitting at like 75, 80. Which is nuts. Like in the late game, sometimes it would go slightly above 100. But it was still almost quite literally half of what the opponents were running. Not sure what that is all about. Maybe sauna. Maybe the sauna is very good for maintaining your heart rate. I think it is. This is my running theory right now, okay? Maybe the sauna is actually overpowered. Maybe the sauna needs to be nerfed. I don't know. Little Zergling scout over here. Both players playing this very safely across the board. Reynor making a big round of links here. Yeah, at least relative to the opponent, but it's really not a significant amount. Both of them are trying to drone, and both of them are trying their absolute best to keep the opponent on their toes. No mistakes made yet by both players. We haven't really had any significant losses. Overextension though on Serral's Overlord, which might be kind of annoying. He does need to have vision of this top lane. That's why the Zerglings are running over here right now as well. Reynor anticipates that movement. He wants to give the Queen the opportunity to get the kill. Brenda gets body blocked. Ah! The Ovi actually lives. Bailing over here. Nope. You got lucky. Okay. Now, there are some roaches moving in as well. Decent bailing detonation over there, but good zoning by Reynor. Yeah, quite a few units are moving in. This is one attack for all the marbles. Reynor has started up a defensive spine crawler, and I think he has all of the tools ready to defend against this push. Now, this is a Zergling run by here from Serral. Usually that is Reynor's play. A lot of lost mining time here on the side of the Italian at the bare minimum. He needs to send those drones back ASAP. Honestly, too much lost mining time here for Reynor. Maybe feeling the heat of the tournament just a little bit. Serral, though, gets the roaches back on creep, and he's just microing. He's just sending the units around the main and ultimately sacrifices them. Lair is building, though, for Reynor. And it's before the opponents. Serral has committed to a +1 armor. +1 armor benefits Lings, Banes, Roaches, Ravagers, all of the early game units, but it falls off the longer that the game goes on. So it's something that needs to gain value as soon as the upgrades is finished. So that's why we see non-stop unit production right now. Serral is effectively ready to send one push across the map for all the marbles to try and see if he can win this particular quarterfinal series by going for one big Roach all-in. Reynor's trying to figure out what he's playing against. He's already started up a defensive spine crawler. He's even had some units in the main base too to defend against a potential Nidus or something along those lines. Not the case here. Gets a decent detonation and also gets a tell on the amount of workers that the opponent's mineral line has. He starts up a 4th, which honestly feels like bait. Yeah, immediately upon seeing the 4th, Serral goes across the map. +1 armor is seconds away from being done. He's looking to basically hit the opponent in the face with the sharpest possible moment. This attack needs to commence in 10 seconds. Where do you fight, though? Spine crawlers have been set up in really nice positions. Reynor needs to try his absolute hardest to hold on. He's got an 8-worker advantage and a 4th base as well that he now cancelled, actually. Spine crawlers are good, but Serral wants to commit. He's sending a bunch of the banelings around the back. Uses them to mostly just force disruptions in the opponent's Roach armies. But Reynor holds on here as he is, well, once more sending in reinforcing units. And the more time goes by, the better this becomes for the defending player, right? The more units you can spawn in this battle, the better it's gonna be for the guy that can spawn them close to the battle. So Reynor holds. And he does so pretty easily too. He's got an 8-worker advantage. He's got that lair. He's going into the Roach speed upgrade. It's about halfway done at this point in time. He's got a 33-35 supply lead. The stars are aligning right here for Reynor. This is about the best case scenario for him. Serral needs to prepare for an imminent attack from the opponent, and that's exactly what he does. Builds up the spine crawlers in a mirrored location to the ones on the other side of the map, or at least where they once upon a time used to be. But he needs to finish up his own lair. He needs to get these upgrades going. He needs to make sure he gets Roach speed. And all of that is already ready right here for Reynor. Now, Reynor still has a lot of reinforcements ready to go, but the Roach speed upgrade is done. And he is ready to strike while the iron is hot. He's got an upgrade advantage. He's got a unit advantage. He has a speed advantage too. The spine crawlers are not yet done. He decides to move in. Zerglings from Serral go around the site. A lot of the defensive units from Reynor are not, however, part of this particular engagement. They're showing up right now as a lot of those Roaches in blue have already gone down. Serral holds, it seems, with more and more reinforcing troops falling. And that push right there was a major misplay from Reynor. Honestly, a tremendous error. Effectively, all Reynor needed to do was wait for his reinforcing units to show up. If he had all of his troops in one big ball at the start of that engagement, that would have been a win right there. That would have been game over right then and there. Serral faking a move out over here on the right, at least pretending to go for a run by, it forced Reynor to split off like 10 Roaches defensively, at which point Serral sent those Zerglings back home, which he then wrapped around the back there to surround those units and made it impossible for them to retreat. Reynor right now goes into a Spire. That, however, was Serral escaping by the absolute skin of his teeth. Like, that could have been Serral eliminated out of the EWC right then and there. This is one of the problems, right? When you can almost taste the victory, when you can pretty much see yourselves in the semifinals and potentially even win the entire thing. Sometimes you forget thinking clearly for just a moment, and that is all that Serral needs. It's a Spire again for Reynor, which has been scouted by Serral. There's a Changeling hiding behind that gas geyser here, out of the line of sight. That means that, again, a Hydralisk Den is coming up. Hydra production has started. Now, this is still a very playable spot here for Reynor. He's got a good army. He still has about a 20 supply advantage on the opponent. Economically speaking, he's fine. His upgrades are looking pretty darn good, but Serral has caught up in that department and is actually pulling ahead there too. Since he started off with the +1 armor, it's a small advantage, but still one that is noteworthy. Reynor is gonna grab full map control again with those mutas being out on the map. Burrow coming up here for Serral. Tunneling Claws is extremely annoying, as we already saw in one of the previous games. Couple of reinforcing Zerglings as well, just for scouting, it seems, as Corrosive Balls will begin again. So far, nice dodging here by Serral. Zerglings are gonna get denied easy peasy. Spore Crawler also building here for Reynor. He knows that very likely Tunneling Claws will be done here in just a moment. Tunneling Claws is always a problem to deal with. Defender's advantage again here for Serral, though, and that is big. The Corrosive Balls are decent, but the dancing here, I mean, it's not really going anywhere. Both of them are dancing. Corrosive Balls are flying. Neither of them really committing. Serral, though, wants to hug. Reynor's like, no, thank you. I hate hugging. Can't blame the man. I would not want to hug with a roach either. Okay, Hydras are going to get their speed upgrade in just a moment. Couple of the Overlords here for Reynor. He never got Overlord speed, so he's gonna lose them to the Hydralisks of Serral right now. And they need to be respected. Hydras do deal a lot of damage. Infestation Pit coming up right now for Reynor. He's still building up additional static defense too, and this is starting to become quite costly. Split off on the roaches here though for Reynor too, as he's once more approaching the section of the map that's gonna haunt him if he's not careful. Nice advantage right here for Serral, though. Suddenly, if we look at the worker count and if we look at the army count, Serral has pulled ahead. This has been about a 20 supply swing. All of those engagements just slightly better here for Serral, who now also gets a cancel on the opponent's base here. Overlord still tickling a bunch of those, or Mutas rather, still tickling a bunch of those Overlords to death. Now, Reynor has already been preparing, right? He's got a Spine Crawler and a Spore Crawler in every single one of his bases, it seems. So that should make it pretty straightforward, except for the main. That should make it pretty straightforward to defend against the Tunneling Claws this time around. Roaches move in towards the right side again. Serral's looking to get a cancel on that base. Reynor preemptively just shuts it down because he knows it's never going to happen. Roaches in the meantime also moving in on the left. Lurker Den coming up right here for Serral. Hive just, well, about halfway done. Reynor is ahead in that department, but Reynor's Hydra Den was later, so he hasn't yet started up a Lurker Den. Serral moves in, though. He gets a pretty decent connection over here, but those Spine Crawlers in these positions, right, they're just so freaking powerful. He wants to move in, though, and you know what? This choke point here may just work out. Hydra's all over this as well. That's super painful here for Reynor. Reynor forced to use the all-army hotkey, brings as many of his units back home towards this intersection. Only 5 drones ended up going down, but there's the Lurker Den coming up for Reynor. 5th hatchery building for Serral in the meantime on the left side of the map. He already has a Lurker Den of his own and immediately starts up the ranged upgrade, immediately fires up the +3 missiles too. Reynor is falling behind as far as the tech goes primarily. It's not by much, but it's about a half minute or so of advantage here for Serral. Serral also has a 5-worker-ish lead, and the armies here are looking pretty good. Plus, one big advantage here for Serral is that he's already been making Hydras for a while. Reynor doesn't yet have all of those upgrades done, and he doesn't really have them yet, meaning that it's much easier for Serral to get the transition towards Lurker started, whereas Reynor still needs all of those upgrades done before he can really reliably play it. Nice Corrosive Balls, though, onto that Overseer. 4 bases is enough, though, for Reynor to turtle on. Large group of roaches has been split off. Reynor will see them here in just a moment, but those roaches are already, in a position where he did not quite expect them. There has been a split as well blindly by Reynor, but he doesn't quite have enough units in this direction. Looks like Serral in the meantime is moving in, but he also has the lurkers. And the lurkers, burrowed right over here, burrowed right over in this section of the map, would be nearly impossible to break without Vipers. Defensive lurker startup right now here for Reynor. Serral decides to dodge the corrosive balls. He still has those units on the left, but he is starting to move the lurkers as if they are siege tanks, leapfrogging the ones in the back further and further forward towards this choke point. Roaches on the left side, man, these could also hurt if he realizes that they are currently on idle, but Serral is smelling blood in the water right here, right now. Reynor realizes that he can't really break that position, so he decides to go in for the counterattack. Natural expansion, though, of Reynor is being overwhelmed. The third is in trouble. The fourth is under attack as well. Reynor finally has arrived on the other side of the map. Corrosive Balls will shut down any of the cocoons that are here. Accidentally clicks onto an extractor. That is not what we should be hitting at this point in time. Third base is gone. Fourth base is going to disappear. Natural expansion, that's the hive, is also not a long while away from falling. In the meantime, though, Reynor has taken care of his opponent's third base. Natural expansion is also falling. Serral's now leading this game with about a 50 supply advantage. Main base is going to be behind here in just a moment. Drones need to run away. Serral's making an expansion in the far bottom right as well. Trying to just keep some mining going here. Reynor's +3 missile is not going to finish up, it seems, as the upgrade gets denied. Roaches in blue, though, are still going to town. Reynor is building a new expansion in the middle of the map. He's targeting bases here as well at the very bottom. For some reason, he seems to have a personal vendetta against extractors when he could just be killing the hatcheries themselves. Serral, though, also has another base here on the far left. I don't know if Reynor has seen it. No, not yet, but he does have a Hydra, or a Muta, rather, that is attacked by a Hydralisk, trying to go to town here. The problem is the lurkers. It's 13 of them, and that is not going to be easy to break. Reynor is moving through right now, but he will see the lurkers. I think that may have been a hot fire as well from Serral. As Serral ultimately obtains the victory in this particular best of 5. But look, we were, I want to say, about 3 seconds away. If Reynor would have just been ever so slightly more patient, we were about 3 seconds away from Serral getting eliminated in the quarterfinals. That's insane. Like, we all know that he then proceeded and went on. Well, spoiler alert, in case you don't know. He proceeded and went on and won the entire tournament. But we got extremely close to Serral being eliminated in the top 8. If that would have happened, and I think, honestly, this was Reynor's game to win. If that would have happened, the results of the EWC would have looked very different. You could really see as well how upset Reynor was, though, with this final game, because he knew that he blew it, right? And it happens. It's unfortunate. Mistakes were made. He thought he was slightly further ahead than he actually ended up being. He saw that the spine crawlers weren't yet done there, so he decided, you know what, this is my time to go ahead and strike. But I feel for Reynor there. Like, that was extremely unfortunate for him. Well done, of course, by Serral, who does obtain the victory here, 3-2. But this was, for Serral at least, as far as this tournament goes, by far the most difficult match for him.